The president has the power to nominate justices, and the Senate has the power to confirm them. Every Senate election and every presidential election has potential impact on the Supreme Court. Well, this year's vote could have even more significance. President Biden proposed a plan to make major changes to the court, and Kamala Harris has supported those changes. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London tells us more.
Each aspect of President Biden's proposal would need wide support on both sides of Capitol Hill, and any constitutional amendment would also go to the states. While Vice President Kamala Harris has not mentioned this subject during her campaign, she did express support when the president announced his plan. A potential Harris administration would likely pursue the sweeping changes, although they face an uphill battle in Congress.
Biden's three-pronged proposal includes a constitutional amendment that prohibits blanket immunity for presidents, a direct jab at the court's July ruling that declared absolute immunity for official acts as president, affecting Donald Trump's legal issues. Second, setting 18-year term limits for Supreme Court justices rather than a lifetime appointment, and a binding code of ethical conduct for justices. In a White House statement, Biden described his mission as a desire to restore trust and accountability to the American people. Since then, the plan has been met with criticism.
That would be, the most radical change and really attack on the judiciary that we've seen since at least 1937 with President Roosevelt's court packing plan.
Utah Senator Mike Lee called the plan unconstitutional and an attempt to tear down the conservative majority party.
President Biden's proposal for the Supreme Court flies in the face of the U.S. Constitution.
Both House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell predict such a proposal would be dead on arrival in Congress. Andrew Grossman, senior legal fellow at Buckeye Institute.
They're going to be very difficult to bring them through Congress.
For a closer look at what's before lawmakers, we spoke to Regent University law professor Brad Jacob about the president's first prong.
A constitutional amendment requires 2/3 of the House of Representatives, 2/3 of the Senate.
In which case Jacob sees as very unlikely.
The minority party almost always has more than 1/3 of each House. And then it would have to go to the states for ratification and get 3/4.
When it comes to presidential immunity, Biden maintains no one, neither president nor the Supreme Court, is above the law. Even without an amendment, Jacob feels certain criminal prosecutions, such as the effort to overturn the 2020 election, could go forth as planned against Donald Trump.
Especially if he doesn't win the White House and isn't able to call off the Justice Department.
In calling for term limits, Biden also proposes allowing presidents to nominate justices every 2 years for 18-year terms.
That would correct the sort of serendipity of current Supreme Court appointments, that sometimes a president in a very short time gets a bunch of appointments, and some presidents serve a relatively long time.
Jacob says a possible alternative to the 18-year term limit would be endowing justices with a senior status.
You're still a justice. You still collect your paycheck for as long as you're alive, but you become a senior status justice, which means you don't normally sit on cases.
Jacob says giving each president 2 appointments would still keep the court as a priority in presidential campaigns.
We're going to end up voting not just for president and vice president, but president, vice president, and 2 Supreme Court justices.
As for ethics, all 9 justices signed a formal code of conduct last November after public pressure and closed-door negotiations. But some Democrats criticized it over a lack of enforcement, demanding congressional intervention.
For now, the future of the Biden effort to make these changes lies with the November election and a number of elements falling into place. Even if Harris wins the presidency, there would also need to be an overwhelming Democrat majority in both houses to move the needle. While that could make a binding ethics code and term limits more likely, the odds remain even slimmer for a constitutional amendment. Michelle London, CBN News, Washington.
Well, my prediction is all of these proposals are dead on arrival just because they don't have the votes to make it happen. and you start tinkering with constitutions where you don't have a clear direction from both parties that it's necessary, then this reduces it to what it is at the outset. It's pure politics. They're just finding things to campaign on. And so the politicization of the appointment process of the Supreme Court, it's been a real national tragedy. And part of it is the court's own fault. The more times that they rule things either constitutional or unconstitutional, and they step into the role of being the super legislature, well, then that supercharges every single confirmation hearing, and it supercharges the politics of the court. Instead of exercising judicial restraint and allowing democracy and the voting power of people to make social changes, the Supreme Court took it on itself. And all you have to do is go back and look at Roe versus Wade. Regardless of what you think about the issue of abortion, you have to recognize that Roe versus Wade was wrongly decided. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it was wrongly decided. And the Supreme Court put itself into the position of this super legislature that is unaccountable to the people. And so they vote on something very controversial instead of allowing people to do that on their own, whether at the state level or on the national level. And they took the right of the people to decide the culture and the cultural contract that we're under in the United States of America. We've seen it again and again and again, and it's instead of judicial restraint, it's judicial override. And certainly, recently it's been the left that has been producing most of this, but you see it on either side. And somehow or other, we're going to manipulate the judicial system in order to get a social result because we don't trust the election process. We don't trust our representatives to actually do it. Well, that's not America. That's not the principles that we're founded on. That's why you have these epic struggles in confirmation hearings. And the court itself should say, no, we've gone too far. We need to have more judicial restraint. Instead of increasing our power, we need to voluntarily give it up. If you do that, then all of this will evaporate away and it won't be as controversial. Will that happen? I kind of doubt that too. So I don't think these proposals are going anywhere, and I don't think the Supreme Court is going to change its view on how to rule and make sweeping changes based on the vote of 9 justices.